He thought winter had already taken everything from him. Arthur Malone, a 76-year-old veteran who lost both legs in war, had grown used to quiet days and quiet pain. But nothing prepared him for the moment a supermarket manager ordered him to crawl across a freezing tile floor just to prove he deserved his groceries. What that man didn't know was this: healing sometimes begins the moment someone finally stands up for you. And on that winter afternoon, a former Navy SEAL and a loyal service dog would turn humiliation into hope, and a broken spirit into a rising storm of compassion across an entire town. If this story moves your heart, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach those who need them most. Winter on the tile floor, snow pressed against the windows of Cedar Falls, turning the streets into a pale maze of drifting light. Arthur Malone guided his old wheelchair through the nearly empty supermarket, the wheels squeaking in a tired rhythm that matched his breath. At 76, he carried the quiet dignity of a man shaped by battle and softened by age. His body was thin, his shoulders narrow, inside a wool coat that had faded after too many winters. His hair, once dark, had turned a soft silver that framed a face lined by kindness, restraint, and an exhaustion he rarely allowed anyone to see. He had lost both legs to a landmine in a remote corner of Vietnam. The memory never left him. It lived in the phantom ache that rose whenever the cold bit too deep, and in the way he steadied himself before speaking, as if bracing for the world to misunderstand him. But he still came here every Sunday, moving slowly past shelves of soup, bread, and canned vegetables, hoping the simple rhythm of choosing groceries might anchor him to a life he sometimes felt drifting away. He reached the register and patted the pocket of his coat. His fingertips met only cloth. The wallet was gone. A weak breath escaped him. Not despair, but something more fragile, the feeling of a man embarrassed in a place meant for normal days. The cashier, a young woman named Jenny Aldridge, noticed the change in his expression. Jenny, barely in her 20s, had a kind, freckled face and a nervous smile she used to soften awkward moments. She stood slightly hunched, as if trying to take up less space in a world that often felt too loud. "Sir, is everything all right?" she asked in a gentle voice. "I'm afraid," Arthur murmured. "I've left my wallet at home. If possible, could you hold the cart? I live only a mile away. I'll return right after." Jenny nodded at once. "Of course, if you need—" But her words were cut short by the sharp sound of leather shoes hitting tile. Brandon Kerr, the supermarket's new manager, strode toward them with the heavy self-importance of someone who believed attention was a reward he deserved. He was in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, with a trimmed beard designed to look rugged, but somehow only sharpened his permanent scowl. His eyes were pale and restless, the kind that searched every corner for someone to belittle. Rumor among employees said Brandon had been fired from 2 other stores for conduct issues, though no one spoke it aloud. His temper was the kind that lived just beneath the skin, waiting for the smallest spark. "What's going on?" he demanded, pointing at Arthur's cart. Jenny straightened. "He forgot his wallet. I told him he could—" "You told him," Brandon barked. "You're not paid to make decisions." Arthur lifted a hand, hoping to calm the moment. "I'm a regular here, sir. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Brandon leaned closer, his breath hot and sour, his voice loud enough to draw stares from an elderly woman browsing greeting cards. "Do you take me for a fool? I've seen people like you. Fake injuries, fake sympathy, free food for a sob story." Arthur blinked, stunned. "I lost my legs in Vietnam, Mr. Kerr. I assure you." Brandon stepped around the counter and planted himself between Arthur and his wheelchair. "Do not lie to me. Not in my store." Jenny whispered, "Please, sir, he isn't—" "Quiet," Brandon snapped. The store felt colder. Something inside Arthur tightened. Not anger, but a deep old shame he had carried since the night he woke in a military hospital and realized half his body was gone. He had spent 50 years proving he was still a whole man. Now this stranger reduced him to nothing with a single sneer. "I'm telling you the truth," Arthur said, voice trembling despite his effort to steady it. Brandon shoved the wheelchair aside. The metal frame clattered against the tile. Arthur fell backward. His palms hit the floor first, then the rest of his torso, his thin coat providing no cushion. Jenny gasped. The elderly woman turned away, covering her mouth with a shaking hand. Brandon laughed, a short, cruel bark. "If you want the groceries, old man, prove you're disabled. Show us." Arthur stared up at him. What? Crawl, Brandon said, folding his arms. If you really lost your legs, then crawl to the door. Let everyone see. Time seemed to stretch thin. The murmurs of nearby shoppers turned into a ringing hush. Arthur lowered his eyes. Pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. Hunger was not. His hands, mottled and trembling, pressed against the cold tile. His body shifted forward an inch, then another. Pain shot up his spine, but he ignored it. Jenny whispered, "Please don't. I'll pay for your groceries, please." Arthur shook his head once. A soldier's gesture. Quiet. Final. He dragged himself forward. 1 foot. 2 feet. His breath grew shallow, his vision blurring at the edges. He felt every stare like a stone in his chest. He thought of the men he once fought beside, men who never came home. He wondered what they would think of him now, crawling like a wounded animal under fluorescent lights. Snow hit the glass doors in soft, angry bursts, and from somewhere in the parking lot, muffled by distance and storm, came a single, low warning bark. A dog. Just one sound. Calm, controlled, alert. Arthur paused, palms splayed against the tile, unsure if help was coming or if this humiliation was only beginning. The sound faded, but something in its tone lingered, promise maybe, or interruption. Whether anyone would arrive in time remained uncertain. The seal and the dog who saw everything. Snow spun across the supermarket parking lot as Noah Grayson tightened his gloved grip on Ranger's lead. His boots pressed firm tracks into the slush, each step steady despite the faint stiffness that lingered in his left knee. Years ago, that knee had been torn apart by shrapnel on a night no one in his platoon ever forgot. It healed mostly, but it left behind a limp that surfaced when the cold settled in too deep, or when memories rose without warning. Noah was a tall man, broad-shouldered beneath his navy winter coat. His dark brown hair showed the first threads of gray at the temples, matching the silver along his well-kept beard. His eyes, a deep earthy brown, carried 2 lives within them. One belonged to the soldier, alert, analytical, ready to act. The other belonged to the man who had tried to rebuild himself afterward, choosing calm over anger, silence over noise, and small acts of good in a world that often forgot to be gentle. Beneath him walked Ranger, a 5-year-old German shepherd with powerful legs, a sleek black and tan coat, and eyes the color of warm amber. Despite his size, Ranger moved with controlled precision. His black harness bore bold white letters, "Service Dog, Do Not Pet." Every motion of his ears, every twitch of his nose was deliberate. Ranger was trained for medical alerts and crowd assessment, but over time he had also learned Noah's moods, knew when the night darkened behind Noah's eyes and when to lean closer to steady him. They were only here for canned stew and batteries before the storm. A simple errand, a quiet evening. But halfway to the sliding doors, Ranger halted, his body stiffened, tail low but tense, ears angled sharply toward the entrance. His breath puffed in short, alert bursts. "What is it, buddy?" Noah asked softly. Before Ranger could answer with movement, the muffled commotion inside swelled into something unmistakably wrong. A voice, angry, loud, dripping with contempt, echoed through the glass. "Crawl. If you're really disabled, then prove it." Noah froze. For a moment, his mind split open, flashing back to a desert road coated in smoke, a comrade tied and dragged by insurgents. Begging for mercy he never received. Noah had been too far away to stop it. That failure, that memory, lived in his marrow. The present snapped back like a rubber band. Ranger emitted a low growl, a warning note, almost musical in its restraint. Noah's jaw tightened. "Let's move," he whispered. They rushed toward the doors just as they parted with a hiss of warm air. Inside, the supermarket aisle stretched long and sterile under bright fluorescent lights. Customers were scattered near the registers, their faces pale with discomfort, some holding phones half raised, unsure whether to record or intervene. Noah scanned quickly. He saw Arthur Malone first. The elderly man lay half-collapsed on the cold tile, palms scraped red, his fragile body angled awkwardly as he tried to drag himself forward. His wheelchair lay toppled a few feet behind him, one wheel spinning gently. Arthur looked like someone who had withstood storms far greater than this, someone who should never have been forced to weather another. A thin middle-aged woman stood nearby, hand over her mouth. She wore a green knitted scarf and had soft brown curls framing a face that seemed built for worry. Her name tag read, Marlene Hart. She worked at the bakery counter, and though she was not directly involved, her shoulders shook with quiet outrage. At the register, another employee, an older man named Cliff Mercer, stood frozen. Cliff was in his late 50s, tall but stooped from years of stocking shelves. His gray mustache twitched with uncertainty. His kind, tired eyes darted between Arthur and the manager, as if searching for the right moment to speak, but never finding courage enough. And then Noah found the source of the cruelty: Brandon Kerr. He stood over Arthur with one hand on his hip, the other holding a smartphone as though recording the humiliation were some kind of entertainment. His beard was trimmed too sharply, his hair perfectly slicked back, but his expression, smug, provocative, spoiled any attempt at professionalism. His pale blue eyes were small and mean, like someone who preferred power to respect because he had never earned the latter. Noah felt Ranger tense at his side. "It's all right," Noah murmured. "We handle this clean." But Ranger didn't break stance. Arthur shifted again on the floor, wincing from pain he tried to hide. Brandon leaned closer. "Look at that. I said crawl, old man." A young mother, holding her toddler close, stepped back. Her name was Rachel Dunn, a petite woman with tired eyes under a knitted hat. She whispered, "This is wrong," but her voice barely escaped her lips. Noah's boots hit the tile, the sound sharp enough to startle several people. Brandon turned. "Store is closed," he snapped. "Come back later." Noah kept walking. Ranger walked beside him, muscles coiled but controlled, eyes fixed on the manager as if assessing threat levels with each step. Noah spoke only when he reached Arthur's side. His voice was low, steady, carved from years of giving orders under fire. "Sir," he said gently, "I've got you." Arthur raised his head. His eyes, clouded by age and pain, searched Noah's face. Something in them flickered, hope or disbelief, Noah couldn't tell. Brandon scoffed. "Mind your business. This man is trying to steal." "Enough," Noah cut in. The word carried weight. Even Ranger emitted a low rumble, a sound that made Brandon instinctively step back. Noah lifted Arthur carefully, checking his breathing, supporting his trembling shoulders. Ranger stood guard, positioning his large frame between them and anyone who might interfere. Customers watched in stunned silence. Noah's voice remained calm but firm. "You're done talking to him that way." Brandon's face reddened. "Who do you think you are?" Ranger growled again. Noah didn't answer. He didn't need to. The chapter closed on that charge moment, the SEAL kneeling beside the fallen veteran, the service dog standing like a sentinel, and a supermarket full of people holding their breath, uncertain what would come next, but knowing something had finally shifted. The storm the people carried snow spiraled in heavy curtains outside as Noah guided Arthur gently back into his wheelchair. The old metal frame rattled softly, a sound almost swallowed by the rising murmur of voices in the supermarket. Arthur's breath wavered, shallow but steadying as he felt Noah's firm grip on his shoulder. Ranger pressed close on the veteran's right side, his powerful frame forming a living shield. His black and tan coat bristled slightly, the way it always did when he sensed Noah's tension. The service dog's ears tracked every movement around them, yet he stayed still, silent, alert, unmoving unless necessity called. Near the center aisle, Emily Watkins, the student with bright copper hair, stood on a low crate and held her phone high. Her freckled face was flushed from anger and adrenaline. Emily's voice shook at first, but steadied with conviction as she live-streamed the scene. "This man was humiliated for being disabled," she said, "and we are not going to let it disappear into silence." People paused their shopping, some clutching baskets, others frozen with shock. A middle-aged couple stood near the deli counter, both wearing thick winter coats dusted with melting snow. The husband, George Callahan, a stout man with graying hair and a serious brow, looked like someone who rarely spoke but always watched. His wife, Denise Callahan, tall and willowy with soft blonde curls and a gentle way of holding her scarf close, covered her mouth in horror as she learned what had happened. Within minutes, Emily's live stream exploded online. Phones vibrated across the store. Notifications pinged in quick succession. People began sharing, commenting, calling friends. The video left Cedar Falls, then it left the county, then the state. What had happened to Arthur Malone, a soft-spoken, silver-haired man who never raised his voice, rippled outward like a crack through ice. Outside, red and blue lights flared across the snow as two police cruisers pulled in. The officers emerged, wrapped in heavy coats, crunching through slush toward the entrance. The first officer, Sergeant Paul Rivera, was in his late 40s, with dark hair streaked by gray and deep-set eyes that carried years of seeing people at their worst and best. His partner, Officer Linda Cortez, younger and sharp-eyed, moved with the brisk precision of someone who believed rules mattered, but fairness mattered more. The officers stepped inside. The warmth and tension hit them like a wall. "Who called this in?" Rivera asked. Half the store pointed at once. Rivera followed the gestures and stopped when he saw Arthur in his wheelchair. Linda's shoulders tensed. She had grown up in a military family. Her father served 2 tours, and seeing an elderly veteran in distress always struck her harder than she admitted. Brandon rushed forward, smoothing his shirt as if a neat appearance could erase his behavior. "Officers, good, you're here." This man attempted to leave with unpaid goods. "I followed store procedure," Emily scoffed. "You shoved over his wheelchair." Michael, the lanky student with glasses, lifted his phone. "It's all recorded." Rivera took the device, watched 30 seconds of the video, and his face shifted. He didn't speak immediately. He simply lifted his gaze to Brandon with an expression that drained all color from the manager's cheeks. Linda watched the next part of the video, her jaw clenched. "You made him crawl?" Brandon stammered. It was a misunderstanding," but his words felt thin compared to the stark cruelty displayed on the screen. Meanwhile, outside, the snowfall thickened. Crowds began gathering, a slow trickle at first, then a steady stream. Neighbors, passers-by, retirees bundled in heavy coats, teenagers pulled by curiosity or outrage. Some carried signs hastily drawn on cardboard. Others carried American flags worn from old Veterans Day parades. Among the gathering was Harold Jenkins, a Vietnam veteran with a broad chest and sunken cheeks, his once black hair now completely white. He wore his faded military jacket, the patches still intact though the color had dulled. Standing beside him was Irene Maxwell, a grandmother in her 70s with small spectacles and a knitted purple hat. She had the kind of voice that could quiet an argument or ignite one. She lifted her chin against the wind. "Today he crawls on that floor," Irene declared, her breath visible in the cold. "Tomorrow, it could be any of us." Her words carried through the crowd, weaving into the roar of the storm. Inside, Noah stood behind Arthur's wheelchair, his hand resting lightly on the older man's shoulder. It wasn't a gesture of control, but reassurance, a quiet message that Arthur wasn't alone anymore. Ranger sat at Noah's left, perfectly still, his sharp amber eyes tracking the officers as they approached. Though the dog remained calm, there was an invisible tension in his posture, a readiness to act if Noah needed him. Rivera crouched before Arthur. "Sir, I am sorry for what you experienced tonight. We're going to handle this." Arthur offered a weary nod. "Thank you." Linda turned to Brandon. "You're coming with us while we collect statements." Brandon's face twisted. "You can't arrest me! I was doing my job!" "No," Rivera corrected, his voice steady as winter stone. "You were abusing someone." The crowd outside thickened. Camera lights flashed through the windows like fireflies in the storm. People shouted for justice. Some called Arthur's name. Others called Noah a hero. But Noah didn't move from his post. He remained beside Arthur, silent and grounded, the steady presence of a soldier who had seen suffering before and refused to look away this time. Ranger exhaled quietly, fogging the air, as if reaffirming his vow to protect both men. The chapter closed, with the storm raging outside, the crowd rising into a force of its own, and Arthur, for the first time since falling to that cold tile, feeling the weight of humiliation replaced by the warmth of solidarity. Honor returned as winter softened. The storm outside finally began to thin, as if the wind itself had grown tired of carrying the weight of outrage. Snow still drifted across the parking lot, but the sharpness of the night seemed to ease when a dark sedan pulled up to the supermarket entrance. Its headlights cut a clean path through the frost. 3 people stepped out, representatives from the supermarket's regional management office, called urgently from 2 towns away. Leading them was Marjorie Keaton, a woman in her early 50s, with iron-gray hair cropped neatly at her jawline. She wore a heavy charcoal coat and thin-rimmed glasses that gave her a stern, exacting look. Years of handling crises had carved fine lines around her mouth, but her eyes remained keen, quick to absorb details and quicker to judge right from wrong. Behind her walked Daniel Price, a tall financial officer with sandy blonde hair and a narrow face sharpened by long work hours. His nerves showed in the way he adjusted his tie every few seconds. The youngest of the group, Lily Tran, carried a tablet clutched tightly to her chest. She was a petite woman in her late 20s, with straight black hair tied back and warm olive skin. Lily had joined the company only a year earlier, drawn by the promise of rebuilding ethical practices after several public scandals. The three entered the supermarket, and the crowd parted instinctively. The air inside shimmered with the heat of too many bodies packed into a space meant for quiet late-night shopping. Phones were still raised. The police held their ground. And Arthur Malone, back in his wheelchair, sat at the center of all of it, fragile in body, but no longer alone. Marjorie approached him first. She lowered herself to one knee, despite the cold seeping through her pant legs. "Mr. Malone," she said, voice steady but lined with remorse, "on behalf of the Cedar Falls Market District, I offer a formal apology. What was done to you tonight was cruel, unacceptable, and entirely against our values." Arthur blinked behind his glasses. "Ma'am, thank you." Marjorie nodded once, then stood and faced Brandon Kerr, who was now flanked by Sergeant Rivera and Officer Cortez. Brandon's once confident posture had deflated. His slicked-back hair drooped as melted snow slid down his temples. "Brandon Kerr," Marjorie said, "you are terminated effective immediately." Daniel stepped forward with a corporate folder. "Your access codes, keys, and administrative rights are revoked." Brandon's mouth opened in protest, but before a word escaped, the crowd outside erupted into cheers. The glass doors shuddered with the force of a boot stamping in approval. For once, the storm seemed to echo them, rather than drown them out. Linda Cortez gestured toward the exit. "Sir, you'll accompany us while we take statements. Let's go." As Brandon was escorted away, Emily Watkins live-streamed the moment, her copper hair catching the bright fluorescent light. "This is what accountability looks like," she said to her viewers. Inside the store, the tension released like a long-held breath. People began approaching Arthur, some shyly, others with bold gratitude. A retired nurse named Helen Brooks, a tall woman with silver braids and warm brown skin, stepped close and pressed a hand to Arthur's shoulder. Her deep voice, shaped by decades of caring for patients, softened as she said, "You deserved better, sweetheart. We all failed you by not speaking up sooner." Arthur's eyes moistened. He opened his mouth to reply, but emotion overtook his voice. Noah stepped up beside him, steady and quiet. He placed a gentle hand on the wheelchair's handle, his expression softening in a way only Ranger had seen before. "They can't give back your legs," Noah murmured, "but tonight they gave back what that man tried to steal, your dignity." Arthur's knuckles tightened around Noah's hand. "You saved me. And your dog. He's remarkable." Ranger tilted his head toward Arthur, amber eyes filled with intelligent calm. His tail gave a single, respectful thump against the tile. Outside, as the management team prepared a formal press statement, the community began organizing themselves into action. Someone suggested a fundraiser. Another offered to repair Arthur's porch ramp. A group of veterans began discussing how they might honor Arthur publicly. By morning, the internet had pulled its own weight. Donations flowed in. Volunteers offered building materials. Children sent hand-drawn cards. Teachers planned lessons about kindness and intervention. 2 weeks later, the snow finally melted into soft slush. The sky over Cedar Falls loosened its grip on winter, trading its harsh winds for gentler breezes. That afternoon, Arthur invited Noah and Ranger to his small but tidy home on Maple Street. The house had a new ramp, freshly painted walls, and a modern wheelchair provided through the community fund. Arthur brewed tea in an old porcelain kettle decorated with fading blue flowers. His hands trembled only slightly as he poured. "I've seen soldiers," Arthur said, "but I've never seen a dog as brave and calm as Ranger." Noah chuckled softly. "He saved me before he saved anyone else. Now he just keeps doing what he does best." Ranger lay at Arthur's feet, chin resting on his paws, content in the warmth of the living room. The old veteran leaned down, brushing a grateful hand across the dog's strong neck. Outside, patches of sunlight glistened on the last of the melting snow. And in that quiet afternoon, Arthur Malone, who had once believed the world had forgotten him, felt the gentle return of something he thought was lost forever: trust in people and hope stitched back together by countless caring hands. In the quiet after every storm, there is a moment when the world feels still enough for grace to slip in. Some people call it luck, others call it a miracle, but those who have walked through hardship with trembling hands and tired hearts know the truth. It is God's way of reminding us that we are never as alone as we think. That night in Cedar Falls, dignity was restored. kindness rose from unexpected places, and a community became the hands through which God's comfort moved. It is easy to believe miracles belong only in stories, but sometimes they live in the way strangers stand together, in the courage of one man stepping forward, or in the quiet loyalty of a dog who refuses to leave a wounded soul behind. And maybe that is the lesson for all of us. In our everyday lives, at the store, on the street, in our own families, we have the chance to be someone's answered prayer. A small act of compassion can feel like a beam of light in the middle of winter. A simple choice to speak up can become a miracle to someone who has run out of strength. If this story touched your heart, please share it so others may find hope again. Leave a comment with your thoughts and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story that reminds us of the goodness still left in the world. May God bless you, protect your home, and guide your steps with His love today and always. And may you be the miracle someone else is praying for.